Alright, what we're going to do today is a flipped classroom activity on state and local public policy and state and local government. Attached to the Edmodo post, you guys should have found a worksheet that looks like this. Unfortunately, we did not have an opportunity to print out copies for everybody for this video, but if you've got a printer at home or if you can do it at the media center, bring a piece of paper, you can print this worksheet and then it will go a little bit quicker for you as you fill in the notes as we go. If you do not have an opportunity to do that, that's fine. You can still do your notes in Cornell note style or just through standard notes on a piece of paper. But if you're able to print this out, this will make your life a lot easier than if you were to do it all by hand on a regular piece of paper. So as we get started, we're going to be talking about state and local public policy, state and local government. My first thing I want you to do is rate yourself on this learning goal scale, and if you have already printed out the worksheet, there's a place provided right there for you. I'm not going to go over each individual step. You have an opportunity to pause the video and make sure that you get right where you need to be. Our essential questions for this presentation are: what is public policy? Who makes our public policy decisions? And how can we as citizens influence public policy? As we go forward, and there is a lot of vocabulary at the beginning of this presentation, please feel free to pause or rewind and listen again to whatever I'm talking about when it comes to these vocabulary words, because there will be a lot of vocab. Our first vocab word is public policy. Public policy is any course of action taken by the government to improve the community or to address a problem affecting the community. There's not necessarily going to be one correct public policy solution for each issue. Each state and local government tries to find solutions that fit their community. Now, when we talk about public policy, we talk about really any solution that could be solved by the government. And in order to figure out what those solutions will be, we kind of have to know who's in charge. Our first vocab word here is municipality, which is any governing body of a district or community. You can have a municipality of Orlando, of Orange County. It's just an overall term that means any governing body. Our next one is going to be mayor, which is the chief executive of a town, city, or village. We actually have an Orange County mayor as well as an Orlando mayor, and that's the person who's in charge of that specific area. As we go forward and get to a higher level and the state level, we have a governor, who is the chief executive of a state. We also have a city council, which is a committee of people who discuss topics and vote on the best way to improve a city. A city council can be anywhere from 5 to 50 people, and only certain communities have a city council set up. That's important to mention and important to know when you're talking about the difference between a city commission and a city council. They're very, very similar, and most places only have one or another. They do not have both. A city commission is a governing body that has a limit to 5 to 7 members, and it's their job to make decisions that impact the city. In a city commission, you'll almost always find that those 5 to 7 people are elected officials, same as you would have for a mayor or any other governing body in that way. Alright, now as far as money goes, I know that we have a lot of issues in our local and state government that have to do with money, so these two terms are important. And they don't just apply to government, they can apply to regular life as well. A budget is an estimate of expected income. It's usually used to plan ahead for expected spending. Your parents may even have a budget and figure that they'll spend $100 on groceries, $500 on mortgage, or whatever it happens to be. While they're figuring in their budget, they always need to consider their revenue, which is the income that they have. And in this case, it's no different. Revenue is the income of a government, and it usually comes from taxes or other public funding sources. We've got a little bit more key vocab. I know the bottom part, statute, is cut off, so make sure you're listening carefully, and if my head's in the way, I apologize, but that's just how this program works. Home rule means self-government in local matters. So if there's an issue going on in Orlando, it means that the Orlando government is the one solving it. They're not being solved or handled by the whole state government or a national government. A charter is an agreement made by a city that outlines the laws and rules of a city. It's kind of like a constitution for a city, which we mentioned earlier in the year. An ordinance is a law made by a city that applies only within that city. For example, gentlemen, talking to you, it is an Orlando ordinance that you cannot have your underwear showing. Your pants have to be at your waist. So if you walk around in public and your pants are low, you are breaking a city ordinance, which is a city law, and you are subject to a fine. You are breaking the law if you're sagging your pants. I don't care how cool you think you look. Now, that's our city law and our city constitution, so to speak, and our state constitution is just what it sounds like, a written list of all the laws, rights, and responsibilities citizens of a state have. And a statute is kind of like an ordinance, but it's a law made by a state that only applies within a state. So a good way to remember this is ordinance, just like Orlando, our city, starts with O, and it only applies in our city. Statute starts with ST, just like state. That's a good way to remember and differentiate between the two. Now, those of you who have the worksheet have most of this filled out for you. If not, it's a good thing for you to copy this chart down. This is an example of different public policy issues and how different governments might handle those issues. Our first issue is unemployment, and one solution would be to fund training programs, give money to people who can train other potentially jobless citizens on how to do certain skills. Another solution would be to grant tax exemptions, meaning don't necessarily ask certain businesses to pay these taxes, and the idea is that those businesses will take the money they save from their tax exemption and hire new people. And another possible solution is to fund a tourism bureau to help promote travel to Central Florida, which would create more jobs for people who might need to work in restaurants or hotels to fill that tourism need. Our next potential issue is budget deficit, which means you don't have enough money for your budget. Our first possible solution is to raise taxes. If that's where our money's coming from, let's create more of it. Our next solution is to decrease the funding that we're going to be spending our money on so we don't need any more money. And the third solution is to do both, raise the taxes and decrease funding. Our third issue that we have here is traffic. One example of a possible solution would be to build more roads and wider roads. Another would be to increase funding to existing public bus systems. That way we can increase the amount of usage that those bus systems are getting and there are fewer people driving. And a third would be to build new rail system, which is a train system, which is actually happening right now. It's called Sunrail. Okay, so our viewpoints. Groups in the community will have different views on what issues are most important and what solutions are most effective. For example, for unemployment, companies might favor tax exemptions because they save money, but unskilled workers might think the job training is the best solution because that'll help them the most. It'll help make them marketable. So if you guys can see, different public policy solutions have different problems involved, and there's benefits and drawbacks to both. But it really depends on what's the best fit for your community. With limited funds, governments have to choose which issues to address and which to try. Sometimes government is even forced to ignore certain issues because they only have funding to handle certain things. Actually, as citizens, even though you guys aren't voters yet, you're allowed to let your state and local government know what issues you think are important and how you think it should be handled. You can communicate directly with the government by mail, internet, or even request a meeting to speak with them in person. At this point, I'd like all the students to write where they are on the learning scale. And if you printed out that worksheet, you've got a spot that you can just write your number, and we're not going to spend too much time on this. Our state constitution, as you guys have already read about and as you should already know about, is very similar to our federal constitution. Our federal constitution obviously has a larger area of jurisdiction, and according to the supremacy clause in the United States Constitution, it has more power. But the state does need to have a set of rules to address things that may or may not have been addressed by the federal government. So right now I'd like to make sure that you make some space somewhere on your paper or a separate sheet of paper and copy this down, because I promise you they will be referring to the state constitution on your civics EOC. As you can see, the Florida Constitution is set up in a very similar way to our federal constitution in that it has a legislative, executive, and judicial branch, and they act in a lot of the same way. The legislative branch, just like in the federal government, has a Congress, which has a Senate and a House of Representatives, which are just a state House of Representatives and a state Senate. And they do the same thing as the federal government, which is make laws and try to protect the people. They also have an executive department, just like our federal government. And instead of the president being the executive leader, it's the governor. Their job is to enforce the laws the same way it is with the president of the United States. And our third branch of our Florida Constitution and our state government is the judicial branch, which includes a state Supreme Court, a state circuit court, and a state county court. You guys can see that the Florida government really mirrors the federal government in almost every single way. Our current governor is Rick Scott, and yes, he has that frightening face in this particular PowerPoint. But you have the opportunity, if you ever have any issues with any of our policies in our state and you think need to be addressed, I'll attach this PowerPoint to the Edmodo page, and you can click that working link, and it will allow you to email the governor. This governor actually attended an event at our school last year, and a lot of your teachers had an opportunity to meet them. So make sure you ask your teacher if you had an opportunity to meet this particular man. His name is Rick Scott, and he is part of the Republican Party. Our Florida legislature, which hopefully you guys know is a legislative branch, includes our House of Representative member Victor Torres, who's a Democrat, and Senator Darren Soto, who's also a Democrat, and I've also attached working links to their email in case you ever need to contact them or express any concerns with your community. Our Orange County Mayor is Teresa Jacobs, and she's a Democrat as well, and you can actually contact her by Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. She has active accounts on all of them and frequently communicates with the citizens of Orange County. And our Orange County Board of Commissioners includes people, Scott Boyd from District 1, Jennifer Thompson from District 4, and Tiffany Moore Russell from District 6. Freedom Middle School lives in neighborhoods represented by one of these three commissioners. There are many other commissioners, but these are the three that would affect you and your particular home. You can speak to the board in person if you request it, or you can send an online request that will be granted by one of these three people. At this point, I'd like you to rate yourself on the learning goal and learning scale one more time. Hopefully you've understood all of the information that was presented to you and you don't have any further questions. If you do, make sure you email your teacher and they'll be happy to answer it for you. That's it for this particular slideshow. I know there was a lot of vocabulary at the beginning, but fewer notes that you had to take at the end. I hope you guys understand all of the information, and it's something that you are able to actually realize that you can be active participants in your state and local government moving forward.